Right, folks, I guess we can start. So, hi everyone, my name is Paweł. I'm very happy to see you all here, especially at this late hour, the last slot of today's conference. So, really appreciate it that you joined this session. So, for a brief introduction about me, I used to do a lot of coding in Java, but then I moved to the dark side. So now I'm taking care of several teams of developers and DevOps at Xibia, Poland. And today I will tell you a story about impostor syndrome in our industry. So maybe let's start with show of hands. Who of you knows what is impostor syndrome and how it works? Okay, we have quite many people, but you are still here, so you want to know more. That's good. Right, so here's our plan. We'll start with a little bit of background. So what is impostor syndrome? What is not an impostor syndrome? Who should be concerned? A little bit of scientific background. Then we are going to look into the mind of a person with an impostor syndrome, see what's going on there. We'll explore some risks. So what bad stuff can happen? What dark places we can visit with impostor syndrome? Then I will tell you a little bit about few psychological mechanisms. So knowledge about these mechanisms is helpful by itself, but also there will be a bunch of useful practical tips at the end. Right, so let's start with our background. What is impostor syndrome? So basically, impostor syndrome is a psychological pattern or mild personality dysfunction where a person does not believe her skills, abilities, strength, and ability to basically do their job, right? For instance, I was hired as a senior developer and I don't believe that I'm senior enough, or I was promoted to senior developer and I think it was just luck or something and I'm not good enough, despite obvious external evidence of that abilities, right? And there is this constant fear that somebody at some point will discover that I'm this imposter, right? They will discover this and they will take everything away from me. There's this constant fear. So scientifically speaking, there was a paper in late 70s by Pauline Clance and Susan Eames. Those two ladies were conducting research in an environment of high-achieving women. At the beginning, it was believed that imposter syndrome is about women, but later research proved it to be false. It's affecting both men and women, maybe a little bit differently, but we'll get to that. So they were doing research in academia, so professors, doctors, authors of many papers, and they were doing research in some business, right? So directors, some high executive, etc. And there was this common theme that those ladies didn't believe in themselves. They believed that they are imposters, that somebody at some point will discover that they are just imposters. So who should be concerned? Basically, depending on the research you look at, it's between 50 to 80, even 90% of people at some point in their lives, right? So probably it's about half of us as we are sitting here, right? It can happen at any point of our career. When we are just starting our job, we are just hired as a junior developer, right? And we think that, hey, I don't know anything, why did they hire me in the first place, right? Despite like having 5 years of computer science study, for instance, right? It can happen when you are switching your career, right? You are going from coding to management, or from management to coding, from backend to frontend, or what have you, right? And there is this moment of doubt that I'm not good enough, despite all the previous experiences, right? Especially highly successful people or people in some high positions, right? I don't know, like if you are a principal developer, like staff engineer, or director, CEO, a author of, books sold in millions of copies, etc., you still don't believe that you are good enough, right? Sometimes if you sold millions of books, you are not really a good author, but that's different cases. But in general, there are some external evidences of your competence and you still don't believe it. Often people that are intelligent are very prone to imposter syndrome because if you are intelligent, you have this tendency to create a lot of scenarios in your head. You are thinking what can happen, what are the possible tree of choices, possibilities, and it's not always helpful, right? If you are a perfectionist, right? So either the job is done perfectly or not at all. There's no grayness in between. And if the job is not perfect, then you feel like an imposter. You are not good enough. And speaking of the big 5 of personality traits, there is this trait called neuroticism, right? If you have high neuroticism, basically you're emotionally unstable. Like you have a lot of fear in you, you're wondering what's going to happen, how this affects me, etc. And naturally you're wondering if somebody discovers at some point, right? And some terrible things will happen. Okay, so what is not an imposter syndrome? So it's not about deceiving somebody on purpose. If you are with premeditation saying that you know something or you are able to do something but you know that you can't, you are just an imposter, right? You're a fraud. It's not an imposter syndrome, okay? It's not about momentary doubt. So all of us from time to time have these moments of doubts that, hey, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing very well, I fucked up on production, something like this, right? This happens to all of us, but in imposter syndrome, it's about prolonged periods of time. So if it's happening over months, year, then it's a problem. Right? It's not mental illness per se, like there's no International Code of Diseases, this code for illness, although in one British research, I believe, I read that they are planning to actually make it an official mental illness, we say by this. Okay, it's not about humbleness. So humbleness per se is a nice trait, right? You don't have a very high ego, right? You are not boasting, but if it stops you from doing nice stuff, from expanding your horizon and stuff like this, then it's not a very good situation to be in. And it's not specific to women. It was thought so initially, but later it was discovered that men are affected as well. Although there are some meta-studies, I read one meta-studies based on around 60 papers, and around half of them says that women are a little bit more susceptible, and it's the same with minorities, right? Women sometimes are a minority in IT, in our industry, so maybe if you are in general in minority, you have this need that you have to prove yourself more, right? And it's a bit harder sometimes, right? If you Google for top 10 celebrities with imposter syndrome, you are going to find a lot of similar quotes, right? That there was some mistake, that I was chosen, that I get so far, right? That every time there is some situation that something is happening, I have to prove that I'm not a fraud. Every time it's a problem, right? No matter that you are able to achieve what you did, there is this fear that somebody at some point will discover that you are just a fraud and they will take everything away from you. There is this constant fear, there is this feeling of inadequacy, and at some point somebody will find out. That's the common theme. All right, now let's look into the mind of a person with imposter syndrome. So whenever such person has success, it is attributed to one of two things. One thing, external factors, right? I was successful because I was lucky, right? Because there were some good circumstances. Like for instance, I'm applying for a job and I'm the only candidate, and they desperately need somebody, right? So obviously they had to pick me because there was no one else. So nice circumstances, right? Maybe I was lucky. Maybe I was able to deceive the recruiter that I'm more intelligent, in fact, or better than other candidates, right? Maybe there was some misjudgment. So, for instance, I'm applying for a programmer, but they didn't have anyone technical to do the interview, so they sent like an engineering manager without a technical background to just, check my soft skills. The manager says, yeah, he's okay, whatever, right? So I was lucky. Somebody was misjudging me in my favor, right? And maybe I had some connections. I was able to get a job because of my connections. And here, disclaimer, connections per se are not a bad thing, right? This is your asset, just as your experience, your skills. And it's good to use your connections, of course, not in, pathological sense, like, I don't know, in politics, for instance, right? We can read a lot of articles in newspapers, what's happening, but, healthy usage of connections is fine. So we have those. This is the first possibility, right? We are successful because of two reasons. One reason is external factors, and the second reason is overwork, right? So I was only successful because I put all those additional hours. I didn't even log them into the company system because, in my mind, some average Joe would do this twice as fast as me, right? I just had to put these additional hours. So this is the second possibility. External factors or overwork. The only reason for my success, not myself, my skills, abilities, etc., right? Now, all of us in our head, we have this kind of belief filter, like a model of reality that we are creating over the first 20 levels of our character or first 20 years of our life, right? Because the world is very complicated, we are coming up with some simplifications, right? We are trying to find some simple rules for the world because it's easier in general. We are creating some, buckets for certain things, right? We are grouping them together, and then it's a bit easier to process. And then whenever you encounter some information that does not really fit your belief system, you will bend it a little bit, right, to fit. If you encounter an information that contradicts the belief system, it's painful a bit, right? You are going to probably ignore it or just break this information. This will be important a little bit later, but probably at some point you had this situation that you read something online, for instance, and you were looking at it, you think, what a bullshit, right? It just didn't fit into your belief system, into your model of reality. Now, we have our zeros and ones, right? We are in computer science, so zeros and ones are cool. But this again, this problem with perfectionism, right? So for a person who is a perfectionist, job is either 1, perfect, good, right? Or 0, nothing, trash, and there's nothing in between. If your job is 95, 98, 99% in quality or finish 99%, you will just round it down to 0 again, and it's worth nothing, right? And this is a little bit of problem with impostor syndrome, because most things you are going to run to the 0 in this situation. Now, how does relate to technology, right? So first of all, in general, in software industry, we tend to believe that we are smart people, right? So I was mentioning, if you're highly intelligent, then you are more prone to the impostor syndrome. You are just figuring out all those possibilities, what can go wrong. Our industry is kind of intangible, right? What does it mean? If you have some classical craftsmanship, like let's say you have a blacksmith 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, right? There was a blacksmith, right? His father was a blacksmith, his son will be a blacksmith. Blacksmith is creating swords, for instance. You have a sword. You can judge a quality of a sword. You can take it into your hand. You can check if it's well balanced, right? If it's sharp. Maybe not with your finger, if it looks nice, etc. Some other classical jobs, as a baker, painter, whatever, it's easy to judge the quality. But what we are doing is a bit like magic to other people, right? Like, do the experiment and try to explain to your grandma that you did a wonderful suite of automated tests, right? Or maybe your method has low psychometric complexity. Nice thing, good quality, right? Whenever something is difficult to explain to normal people, let's say, there is an opportunity for doubt to set in, right? And you are prone to be an imposter because you don't know if what you are doing is good, right? Our industry is growing very fast. And I think it was like 8 or 10 years ago, I read a quote by Uncle Bob that on average, a programmer has 5 years of experience, or the median experience is 5 years. I'm not sure if it still holds, probably not, but still, our industry is growing very fast. There is an influx of people, a big influx of people, and we are creating a lot of stuff, right? We are creating new version of languages, new libraries, new framework, like, let's write another front-end framework, because why not, right? That's a great idea. We are creating a lot of layers of abstraction where we can solve different problems, and at some point, after a few years, there's just so much of it that you don't feel very confident that I should know, this framework, that stuff, and it's kind of easy to feel like an imposter, right? Because I'm a software developer, I should know all those things, right? Tricky. And we are kind of surrounded by this attitude, fake it till you make it. So you are reading about startups that are solving hunger in Africa or curing AIDS or whatever, right? And you are thinking how your work compares to that, and it's not very good sometimes, right? All right, so now let's look at what dark places we can visit here. So first of all, when you have this fear that somebody will discover at some point that you're an imposter, you have this defensive process running in your head, right? So constantly you have to be aware of your surroundings, whether you are in a safe environment, if somebody you don't know is listening, if you can tell something or not. And this process takes up energy, right? Your mental energy, your willpower, if you will, or maybe your cycles of your processor in your head, right? So it makes you tired in general. You can do less other stuff because of that. If you're afraid that somebody will find out, it leads to some anxiety states. You are constantly in this fear that something bad will happen. There is this whole topic of professional burnout. It's like 12 stages of burnout. It's a topic for a different presentation in general. But in the end, you can reach some really dark places, get into some real mental problems such as depressions or similar. Right? So there's a problem with balance, right? Because if you choose this overwork path, right, you will spend a lot of time on polishing stuff so that it's good enough, then you won't have a lot of free time. So life-work balance is in danger, right? Naturally, if you're afraid that somebody will discover, you will keep everyone at distance a little bit, right? So there is a problem with relationships, either professional or even private sometimes, because they may find out. Right? Bad stuff will happen. There's this procrastination because at some point you are going to be put into tests, so you are just postponing this moment of some difficult work you are going to do. Like there is this most difficult task in a sprint and often most important, so you are just taking some easier task that you are comfortable with. You are pushing this complicated task away, and at some point, priorities are broken. Sprint is nearing to the end, right? The big task is not done. The product owner is angry, right, and has a reason to be. And in general, if you just started with a big task, it would be fine. You could do this, right? You are good enough. But because of this procrastination, it was actually a self-fulfilling prophecy that, in the end, there was a failure of sprint, right? And you are naturally afraid of changes. So you will be afraid to change job. You'll be afraid to maybe change a project within the company. And we just stay in this comfort zone. You miss a lot of stuff around, right? Because in order to learn, to get new knowledge, to hone your skills, you have to get out of your comfort zone just a little bit. Right? If you are not doing this, you are missing a lot of opportunities to develop, to learn new stuff. Right? And of course, if you are sitting silently, your boss probably will not gonna notice that you are really good. So you will miss some kind of raises, promotions, and stuff like this. And because you are not speaking up, also your team misses on all your good ideas. The team, the company, the tribe, or whatever is the division in the company, and basically entire, let's say, IT in the end is missing your input and ideas. So it's not good. All right, now let's look at some psychological mechanisms that are relevant to imposter syndrome. So first of all, the realization that something like that even exists, right? It's not that like you are impostor. There is this mental condition, an impostor syndrome, and this is the first clue that can be helpful. The second is that this is very common, right? It's not like 1 or 2%. It's half of us in this room, basically. You're not alone, okay? And to some extent, it's solvable. How much solvable? It's a little bit philosophical topic. It's like with mental illnesses and stuff like this, there's a question whether you can get rid of your demons or not entirely. But for sure you can learn how to live with those demons and drink tea from time to time or something stronger if needs be, right? So in order not to be too softish on this conference, I have a diagram for you. Right? So this is the imposter cycle. This is the central mechanism of imposter syndrome. We are running in these cycles, and each cycle strengthens this feeling that you are an imposter. So how this works, there's a task, right? You're looking at this task, you're of course afraid, you have all these doubts, all these things kicks in that, okay, now they are going to discover in the end, I'm doomed, it will be a disaster, but at some point you decide to start acting, and you can choose one of two ways. Either you are going with this extra effort, right? Overwork. So you are going to put additional hours, not log it into the company system, of course, polish it as much as possible, spend a lot of time, and succeed, of course. Or you can procrastinate. So you can think, okay, this is the end. They will know at this point I'm doomed, nothing to be done. Or maybe I will just be lucky again. So you just postpone this thought, procrastinate. I have this memory from some time ago when I was at the university. So there is an exam, half hour or 1 hour before the exam, you are now cramming from the book at the last moment. At some point you just say, okay, fuck it. I'm not doing this anymore. You just stand up, go for a walk, for a coffee, or a cigarette or something. It's a form form of procrastination. You are putting away this thing about the test or difficult task in front of you, right? So we choose one of those two ways, right? Because we are competent in general, we were successful in our tasks, so there is this momentary relief. Okay, they didn't discover yet. And now you are getting this positive feedback about yourself, and now this internal filter that you had in your head kicks in that, hey, I'm not competent, so if I'm getting feedback that I'm competent, it's not true. You are just discarding this feedback, right? It doesn't fit your mental model of yourself. You are just ignoring this feedback because you have your own explanation. It was one of those two reasons. Either I was successful because of the overwork, or I was successful because I was lucky, some external factors, of course. If I procrastinated, the only explanation is external factors. So we have explanation why you were successful. And this strengthens this feeling that you are an impostor, right? Because you were not successful because you are good, but because of some external factors being an impostor. So there are some thinking over, and we have another cycle, and this cycle basically repeats and repeats, and you are feeling even more impostoring, right? So a few words about perception of knowledge. So this our mental model. In this our mental model, we are creating those kind of like a buckets, right? We are simplifying some groups. So for instance, we have a bucket for a developer. We have a bucket for a manager, a scary manager, a scary bucket, right? We have a bucket for, tester, etc. And now, when you're talking to, say, one developer, you're getting a piece of information A. You're talking to a second developer, you got a piece of information B. Third developer, C. What happens in your mind is those all three developers merges, right, into some generic developer that knows all of that, right? And now in your mind, you think that all developers know a lot, and I know this very little, right? And it's not very comfortable. Whereas, in fact, in reality, it's not like that. It's just that people have different sets of knowledge, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller than yours, but it's not that all of them knows all of that. So be careful of this effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Who's familiar with Dunning-Kruger effect? Yeah, I should be familiar. I should raise my hand. All right, so the Dunning-Kruger effect is the relationship between confidence and competence, right? We have competence, we have confidence. And what's happening, maybe first disclaimer, we are not good in seeing the difference between competence and confidence. If somebody acts confidently, right, thinks he's confident, saying stuff confidently, we kind of assume that they are competent, right? It just works this way. And whenever you are learning some new stuff, or you're maybe starting some new career path, at the beginning you have a lot of successes, like a lot of easy green paths, like stuff is working, you deploy your first Spring Boot application, you got hello world from the endpoint, you're a web developer, right? You're good, right? So very quickly you gain this confidence at the beginning until you reach this peak of man stupid, right? And then after that, maybe you change a project, maybe you change a company, and maybe there are some fuck-ups in production. At some point you are starting to see how big is the field you are in, right? And you are realizing that you actually know very little, very small fraction of this field. And now you are losing this confidence very quickly, and you are going into the valley of despair, right? And only after that, with time, steady experience, you are still getting your confidence back, right? Now, in our industry, this peak here happens, I think, around after 1 or 1.5 years of experience on average. I did a lot of technical interviews. I had like probably 50 to 70 people I was leading, so I was talking with a lot of people with various types of experiences, and also at some point I had 1 year of experience, and I remember what was I thinking at this time. So basically after this 1.5 years, we have this feeling that, hey, I know Java 10 out of 10, I know Spring 10 out of 10, right? Hire me for senior position, give me a raise, stuff like this, right? And then after that, some different projects, some more experiences, we kind of back off a little bit, right, from this statement. And how is it relevant to impostor syndrome? Basically, if you are somewhere more along this line and you are seeing those people who are on this peak of man stupid and they feel very confident, you are not really good at, detecting that they are fake. And you have this feeling that, hey, this person has like 3 times less experience than me or 2 times less experience than me, but still looks like he's better, right? It's not, something is wrong with me, right? And it's not really true, everything is okay. You are just on at different points in this Dunning-Kruger effect scale. Okay, another interesting effect, the spotlight effect. So, basically, we are a bit more egoistic than we would like to believe, right? So we think that other people pay more attention to us than they really do. For instance, imagine that you are in some group photo situation, you are taking pictures, right? Then you are looking at this photo, and what's the first thing that you are looking at? Yourself, right? You are checking if your tie is straight, if you don't have any stain on your t-shirt and stuff like this, right? And then you are looking at other people probably. And we kind of assume that people are paying more attention to us than it is in reality. So the moral from that is that you shouldn't be afraid, to speak up, to join discussions, to just basically be in the spotlight, because people are not really actively looking for your mistakes, right? Don't be afraid of this. All right, next we have the curse of knowledge, right? So small children have this feature that they think that everyone else knows and feels the same as they do, right? We grew up from this to an extent, okay? So we have all those, for instance, story about technical people and non-technical people who can't understand each other because they kind of assume that the other person knows all this stuff. And how is it relevant? Basically, I had an experience of for about 2 years, I was a Java guild master in our company. And one of the parts of this job was to look for people who would speak on our internal events, right? We had an event every quarter. I needed to find like 3 speakers or something. So I was talking to a lot of people. Hey, can you talk? Can you talk? Can you talk? They were shy, right? But also they have this explanation that they don't have anything interesting to say. Everyone else knows what they do, right? They assume that everyone else knows what they do, like 3-year-old, basically. And this is not true. If you have a lot of experience, like if you are a senior developer, you can tell a lot of stories from your experience, some examples, right? If you're a junior developer, you can research some new library, for instance, that seniors are too lazy to look at, right? I can do presentation about this, like look at every Java conference, there is a presentation, what's new in Java 21, 22, 20 something, right? This is something that you can look up in the documentation, but people are still going to these presentations, right? And they're actually one of the best speakers in those slots often. So it's a good idea to, talk about something, because you can have a lot of unique knowledge that other people does not know for many reasons. All right, some solutions now. There was a Twitter or X, whatever, thread that I discovered some time ago. So basically there were people that were in tech, in science, engineering, that they were writing about what seemingly obvious things they have to look up, right? Or copy from previous project, or Google, or ask ChatGPT. And sometimes those are very trivial things. I don't know, how to center a damn div, for instance, right? Basically, I tell you a secret. All of us Google stuff, right? Or currently, all of us ask ChatGPT for stuff, even basic stuff. Right? We copy stuff from previous projects. We Google. My personal confession with Java would be that I still don't remember how to read a file from a disk to a memory. As though those are those streams that are nested. And basically, I always Google that if I need this. I remembered when I was doing a certificate in Java 5 some time ago, okay? But now I don't remember. So especially if you're a junior developer, you might have this feeling that you should know everything about your language or your framework or your library. You don't have to, right? You can check stuff. That's okay. Okay, a few words about comparisons. So we tend to compare ourselves to other people. And this is a problem, right? If you assume that people are objects, we are going to be objectifying people now, but let's assume this for a moment. People are objects, we have private stuff and public stuff, right? We show some public stuff that we choose to, right? And we have some private stuff that nobody knows about. Nobody knows how much time we spent on learning something, how many fuck-ups we did, sometimes spectacular. right? And also, even this public stuff that we show goes through this filter. First, it's our filter, what we choose to show, and then there's the filter of the receiving person, right? Every person has some mindset and adds additional filters, right? So it's not a good comparison. A good comparison is comparing yourself to a snapshot of yourself earlier in time, right? So compare yourself to yourself in 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and see what was the progress, right? And this is a good way for comparisons. All right, Japanese have this art of fixing broken ceramic with gold, right? So they have this idea that if an item is broken, they can fix it with gold, and then it will be unique, right? It will have a soul. So whenever you think about yourself, like physically or mentally, or your work, that this is broken somehow, you might think about this, that this is unique and this has a soul, right? It might be helpful a little bit. All right, gaming. So who of you plays some computer games with achievements? Yeah, we have some gamers here, right? This is, I think, from Diablo 3. Yes. So basically, achievements in games are there for a reason, right? We get a shot of dopamine when you get an achievement. And now, whenever you feel down that you didn't achieve anything, it might be a good idea to create a list, right? You can list maybe all jobs that you did, all projects that were successful, all the books you read, all the courses you went through, all the conferences you went to, stuff like this, your idea. It can be a LinkedIn profile or CV or something totally different. And then when you are a bit down, you can just look at this list and see, okay, maybe I'm not that bad, all right? Here we have on paper. By the way, some people say that if it's a physical form, so put on paper, it works better, right? Until your dogs eats it or your house burns down, right? So we are in this IT world, we have this, 9 nines of durability, but still somehow we're living in the physical world, and sometimes it works better. I'm not sure about this, some say that. Okay, again, social media filtering, so stuff that you see on social media, something that somebody chooses to put their best side, it's filtered, sometimes literally like on Instagram, and then it goes through your filter, your own mental filter. So don't believe social media, and take it with a grain of salt. Looking for a job. We have space unicorns, okay? Sometimes when you look at the job ads, you just see this space unicorn that they expect that this, and this. Speak 5 languages, right? And stuff like that. So I remember that a job listing is often a wish list, right? You don't have to check all the boxes. There was an experiment in IBM in the 70s. They were comparing how often men and women were applying for internal projects at IBM. It turned out that men were applying when they were checking out like 60% of requirements. Ladies about 90%, so maybe ladies back then were not that confident. But in general, if you don't check all the boxes, you can still apply, just be honest about this, right? Don't be an actual imposter. Now we have the reptile brain of software developer, right? So when we are developing software, it's basically happening in the newer part of our brain, in the neocortex. Neocortex is kind of new. Other important stuff like survival is governed by the old parts of our brain, like the emotional part. And now, when you're looking at some software problem, you don't know why something is not working, or you don't know why something is working, right? You are thinking that, hey, okay, I don't know how to deal with this problem. I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. Somebody else would do this much better. They will fire me, right? You start to feel this fear. And whenever we start to feel fear, then this old part of your brain kicks in. We are looking whether there is a tiger that is going to eat us, right? Should we flee or fight or freeze, or what's happening? And what's happening biologically, the blood flow to neocortex is cut down. So basically, whenever you're afraid that you are stupid, you are making yourself stupid, right? It's just happening. You have not enough blood in your neocortex. So whenever you catch yourself on the situation that you are thinking on the problem, you're afraid of consequences, try to detect the situation and try to avoid it. Like, get up, go for a coffee, for a walk. Just try to do something to cut this train of thoughts. And it will be better. A few words about talent, right? Edison famously said that talent is 99% of work, 1% of inspiration, work, perspiration, I guess that was the word he used. So how is it in reality? In fact, people that are successful are always those people who try different ways of doing something, even if it doesn't really work very well, right? So they are persistent. In order to try different things, how to make something work, you probably have to like it, right? If you don't like it, it probably won't work. So the thing is that in our industry, you have a lot of opportunities. You can do a lot of things. Even if you are a developer, you have this label, developer. You can try to be, I don't know, maybe a Scrum Master for some time. Maybe you can do some, move from front end to back end. Maybe some DevOps stuff. Maybe become an architect. Maybe go into some organizing. Right? Become a manager or agile coach or whatever, what have you, right? Sometimes you don't even have to change the label. You can just try a little bit of different stuff. And my advice is to try to find the stuff that you actually like. Because if you are going to do this, at some point you will get good at it, right? So try to experiment a little and find your niche. All right, recruitment. So if you have on occasion to be technical recruiter, this is a good cure for this curse of knowledge, right? Thinking that everyone knows the same as you. Right? You will quickly realize that a lot of candidates don't know a lot of stuff that you do. There's a caveat there, because you might be tempted to, come up with these difficult questions that nobody really knows by heart, like, some specific methods in a framework, in a library or something like that. So don't go this way. In general, the goal of recruitment is to find nice people for our companies, and they are paying us to do that, not to boost your ego. But you can help yourself a little bit in the process if you are careful. Appreciation. So there is one nice book, unfortunately I believe only in Polish, but there was an idea that every one of us has this jar of honey inside of us, right? We can add to the honey to this jar by having some positive interaction with a person, saying some compliment, giving a good feedback, some appreciation. Whenever you have a difficult interaction with a person, giving difficult feedback, you are removing from this honey, right? And now what happens if the level of honey is 0 and you try to remove something? If you have empty collection and you try to take something away, right? It's a problem in general. So basically, if you have to have a good relations at work, it's a good idea to think about filling up this jar of honey at the beginning. Think about appreciating people. It can be saying something nice, giving the good feedback, helping others, even if you put a stupid like on the message on Teams channel, right? It's adding to this jar, and then you can take away from it. Last but not least, almost last, therapy, right? Some people have this idea that they won't go to therapy because they are not crazy, right? There's kind of like social stigma that we should not go to therapies because it's kind of, we are weird or something. But listen, whenever you feel that you have an actual problem, if you are feeling down, if you are maybe in these imposter cycles, don't be afraid to go to a therapist, right? There's no shame in that. Many companies, especially after the COVID pandemics, have some programs to help us with that, like some free visit or something anonymous, so we can check out your company if they have something like this and use it. Now, we like observability and measurements, right? So you can test yourself how much of imposter syndrome you have. There is the most popular test is called Clance IP scale. Pauline Clance was one of those 2 researchers in this paper I mentioned. IP stands for imposter phenomena. So if you put Clance IP scale in Google, you will find a PDF document with 20 questions, scale 1 to 5, something like this. You can calculate the level of your imposter syndrome. If you don't want to calculate it manually, there's a site called psychtest.org, I think. They have some automatic tests that are based usually on this Clance IP scale. So I did like 3 of them, normalized that. It turns out that I'm 42% of imposter syndrome. But it was much worse like 10 years ago. I remember very well being in those cycles, imposter cycles, every sprint basically. I had this feeling, okay, we finished the sprint, I somehow managed to get by. They didn't discover that I'm an imposter, but next sprint, they will know for sure. And it was going for 2 years, okay? All right, this is the last slide. So this QR code leads to my LinkedIn. If you want to join the party, you are welcome to. I'm also on Twitter, X, or whatever. If you want to have a note from this lecture, there is an article on my blog, howtotrainyourjava.com. Not much stuff about Java anymore, more about software, general software people wear. And there are also slides from this talk somewhere there, and there are some area recordings, also probably from a longer or shorter versions from that. Right, okay. So guys, take care of yourselves, take care of others around you. Thank you very much for your time. And questions. We have questions, I guess.
So, thank you for the talk. You've said that we need to track our achievements and maybe seek for some external feedback like what the job offers, job ads are saying. So let's imagine this situation, which I believe happens in some people. You see a job ad which is written like Spring Boot experience, database experience in relational databases like MySQL. So you start doing some projects on your own, like some REST APIs in Spring Boot and MySQL and stuff, and you do this project and this project, you explore interceptors, filters, and you mark these achievements. I did interceptors, I did more data, I had a bigger project, and so on and so forth. Then you go to an interview and they say, how do you deploy Spring in a Tomcat container? What is a prime faces? And how do you call a store procedure from Hibernate? And you're like, I did 10 out of 10 achievements from my own scale, but these people are challenging me on a completely unexplored areas. So how do you set the scale on your own? Because you can be already misconcepting the whole world, right?
That's a difficult question. Like, you know, in our company, we have this document called seniority levels. And I work in a software house, so we have a lot of technologies, .NET, Java, Python, DevOps, etc. And we are trying to come up with a document, like one document where you have a list of what stuff you should know for junior Java developer, mid, senior. And it's basically impossible, right? Because whoever you ask, who should know this, there are different answers. It's really difficult, to be honest, right? Also, many companies don't have very good recruitment processes, right? So they are going to ask you for questions that you don't usually know by heart, and it's not a good idea to do recruitment. Good idea is to, you know, talk with a person, ask about experiences, give them some problems, and like for instance, our interview for DevOps is like one half hour of discussion. How would you set up an environment if you were in a new team, right? What do you think about this, that, this, there's this problem, that problem, and basically our senior DevOps are able to somehow judge how experienced, how good this person is. Right? I'm not sure if there is just one scale that you have 7 out of 10 in being Java developer. It's a tricky question.
Yeah, probably it's not like a real scale, but the problem of setting your own scale is that if you're a newcomer, you may misconcept or may not know all the things that predate you. For instance, you may even not know that Spring Boot has not boot version, right? With manual deployment and stuff, because you just came into the field, you're like year 2 or 3 with experience, and you miss a lot of things before that. How do you draw the path? This is maybe the toughest thing that I see in people, myself as well, and other fellow guys, I don't know.
There's this rule in martial arts. There is this title of sensei, meaning senior instructor, and when they ask you when one's become a sensei, the answer is when other senseis, shihans, I'm sorry, shihan is the senior instructor, sensei is just an instructor. When other shihans start to call you shihan, right? So another measure that we usually use to see how senior our people are is just to ask other people, do you think this people is senior or more towards mid developer, and if so, what is missing, right? And we are looking for answers. Like our general idea, for instance, is that junior is able to do some work under supervision of more experienced colleagues. Mid is like autonomous, right? can get a task and usually can complete the task, and seniors are people who can lead a team basically and have like this higher overview or what is to be done beyond one task or beyond one sprint even. So maybe this is kind of like a way to comparing your levels of skills of seniority in software development in general, right?
Yep. Thank you. So essentially communication with other people and trying to find the mid-ground.
Feedback is important.
Yeah. So if you're all alone in all of this, maybe it's not going to work, right? Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you. Do we have other questions, folks? If you are shy, you can just come up to me later and ask in person. Okay, no other questions? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. All right. Oh, we got a question. Last moment. I will take another picture with you. If
Hello.
You let me.
Thank you for your talk.
All right.
Putting the role on the other side, so we talk about ourselves and how can we achieve or at least suppress the imposter syndrome on ourselves, but having a management role or a leading role, how can we achieve on the members of our team not to feel that way when we more or less identify that some of the members could have some doubts about themselves on our teams?
How to identify if people around us have imposter syndrome, basically. Can we phrase the question like this?
How to help them to feel appreciated. I saw that appreciation and part of Annie, it's always a good thing for us and the other side, but how can we lead them to achieve their goals, or at least for them to see that, okay, you are not that imposter that probably you think you are in the team, or how can we give him some feedback or anything like that?
Fighting with imposter syndrome, in general, it's good to share this knowledge that there is something like an imposter syndrome, but there is also another trick. You can try to normalize not being perfect around you. So, for instance, if I talk with a person that I suspect that has imposter syndrome, I would sometimes mention that, okay, I wasn't feeling very good about this work that I did, or I fucked up something, or stuff like this, right? It worked on me. I was talking with one of our senior architects that I believe was like a god, basically, right? He knows everything, he's perfect. And he shares that, okay, we fucked up this, I didn't feel well about this, and it kind of, normalize not being perfect. So this is a trick that you can use as a team leader, for instance, or just a good colleague in your team. It can slowly sink into people's minds that it's okay to not be perfect.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry? We have still 1 minute. 1 minute.
Where do you draw the line of perfection? How do you draw the line? You say, at this point I need to stop. It doesn't need to be more perfect than that.
That's a difficult question. I have this problem on my own, kind of. Like I spent a lot of time on my presentations and on my slides. At some point I had a presentation where there was a Twitter handle, then a space, a dot, a space, something else, title of the presentation. And at some point I noticed that I forgot about one space, right? It was not, in the middle. And I just decided to leave it like this, as a, kind of a cure for myself, a reminder that you don't have to be perfect. Right? It's, we have this problem with business that we can't do anything perfect because it will take infinite amount of time. So usually somebody probably will come to us and say that, okay, this is good enough, just leave it at this, please, right? And after some time of doing this, we kind of develop maybe this feeling that where is the line, more or less, right? Maybe this is one idea how to deal with that.
Yeah, the problem with me especially is that when someone comes to me and says, well, we were already trying to go to the perfect line and it doesn't need to be, it's already too expensive. I already fucked up tens of times, and this is something that I don't know how to stop. in myself, because when the external feedback comes, it's usually too late. And I think some people are also living in an environment where it's not that controlled that you can have the feedback early enough.
Yeah, you know, in general, we don't have a controlled environment. There is always stuff that you don't know, and software is never ready, basically. Right? So we have to just accept that it's never ready. It's always 90% ready, and this last 10% is like another big chunk of work. It's tricky. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. We are after time, I think. So if you have any more questions, please just come to me personally. And thank you very much again.